Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see you here. It is a little before 2 o'clock Eastern Time, and we will get started in a few minutes. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and get started. On behalf of the committee, we're glad to see everybody here today. This month, we are going to focus on network security, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Before we get started, I've enabled the Q&A function within this meeting, and we're going to try and use that this month. This whole process for us has been a bit of a learning experience in terms of how to use the town hall function within Microsoft Teams, and so we've used the chat function previously, and now this month we're going to try and use the Q&A function. And so if you would, when you have a question, please go ahead and post your question in the Q&A forum, and we'll be monitoring that, and we will post responses to your questions there so that we can try and keep them threaded and organized, as opposed to just kind of rapid fire functions that you see in chat where everything just, there's no organization to it. It's just one thing after another. With Q&A, things tend to stay a little more organized, and we can try and keep them maybe a bit more on task. So to just kind of show you a little bit, I just threw kind of an icebreaker question in the Q&A. How's the weather where you are? And here in Metro Atlanta, where I am, 70 degrees and sunny for a change. It's nice motorcycle riding weather. If only I had the time to ride my motorcycle today, it would have been very nice. But unfortunately, I had other things to do, so no motorcycling for me today. But I hope things are pleasant where everybody is. So I want to start off simply by saying, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. And I am once again grateful that everybody is here today. So let me put my presentation into presentation mode. And click a few buttons here. Teams says it can't display my content. Well, I will just have to share my screen then, and we will have to do that. Okay. And it looks like everybody can see the screen. If you can, please give me a thumbs up very quickly if you can see the screen. You can see the presentation. Yes, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, good. Okay, excellent. And I'm going to apologize. I'm not going to put it into actual presentation mode since I'm having to share the app, because I think it'll do a better job of presenting this way as opposed to just putting it into actual presentation mode. So like I said, this month we are going to focus on network security. And here's our outline. We're basically going to give an overview about network security, both wired and wireless network security. We're going to talk about some of the risks that parishes face. We're going to talk about not cork. Sorry, core network security practices. We're going to give you a few action items, and then we're going to open the floor up to Q&A. As always, I want to take a few minutes to recognize the members of the cybersecurity, the Parish Cybersecurity Subcommittee. I'm Andy Green. I'm the committee chair. I'm a cybersecurity professor at Kennesaw State University here in Metro Atlanta, specifically in Kennesaw, Georgia. Other members of the committee are Andrew Burridge, Stephen Carniotis, who I believe is still here on the call, Father George Callos, who's the Chancellor of the Metropolis of Pittsburgh, Father George Sahakis, who is the Chancellor of the Metropolis of Atlanta, Leon Andrus, who is the Chairman of the Archdiocesan Technology Committee, who I believe is on the call as well. And then Taylor Nikolakis, who is the Director of National Ministries and the CIO for the Archdiocese. The Archdiocese leadership, of course, we are led by His Eminence, the Archbishop, along with His Eminence, Metropolitan Nathaniel, who is the presiding hierarch of the Technology Committee at the Archdiocese level. We continue to use the infrastructure provided by my employer, Kennesaw State University, and the University System of Georgia. So I'm required to always put this disclaimer in that everything that we talk about on this presentation is the collective work of this subcommittee, and it does not represent the official views, positions, or policies of Kennesaw State University or the University System of Georgia. So with all of that administrative stuff out of the way, let's get to the content. Network security, and why does it matter? It matters because we rely on networks every day. at our parishes across the country. Some to a large extent, some to a smaller extent, but we rely on networks every day. Every parish just about has some type of computer network in their environment. And so when we think about even simple networks, and you may have no more than one or two systems in your environment, but even then, the types of data that you have to protect, and we've touched on these before in prior sessions, the sensitive data that you've got to protect, that you have possession of, that data rides the network. When data moves between systems inside your network, when you are connecting from your laptop or your desktop in the office to the internet, right? It's still riding your local network, and you have to think about network security from that regard. We have a hand up. Question: have you been able to post the links to previous talks? The answer is we will post all of them when we are done with the entire series. And so we will host those with the Archdiocese, and the Archdiocese has a centralized location to host all of the talks. And once we get the entire series recorded, we will have those posted. So yes, we will have that. Parishes increasingly are targets, large and small, of threat actors of varying shapes and sizes, and the types of damage that they are looking to do depends on the intent of the threat actor group that you're facing. And so whether or not they are looking to just engage in general bad behavior where they're just looking to cause trouble, whether they're looking to engage in the furtherance of a political agenda, and they're looking to deface a church website in furtherance of a political or social agenda, and they post messages, or they're looking to embarrass somebody, or they are looking to steal financial data, personal data, or they're looking to steal money from parishes. Different threat actor groups are motivated by different objectives, but in all cases, any time that they can get access to your network environment to further their goals and objectives, they're going to do so. And so focusing on your network and making sure that you're taking care of it and being aware of your network and protecting it, it's a key daily component that all parishes, regardless of size, need to be aware of. To think that you are too small to be a victim is quite honestly wishful thinking. Everybody is a target. It is just a matter of time, unfortunately, for all of us. Our church, my church, Holy Transfiguration of Marietta, has been a victim, and it's just a matter of time, and we're just, a quiet little parish, just a few hundred members in Metro Atlanta. You wouldn't think that we would ever be a target, but we have been, and other parishes across the country you wouldn't think would be, have been. And so I share this with you not to scare you or not to put fear into you, but to share with you this notion that nobody would ever attack you because you're just this small little parish in some remote corner of the country, is simply not the case. You have something that somebody wants, and they will come after you to get it, unfortunately, at some point in time. The implications of a successful attack on your network can be, in terms of scope of damage, can range from very small to potentially catastrophic. And again, it depends on the nature of the attack and the success rate of the attack and what it is that the threat actors were able to take from you in the attack. It could range from as little as they were able to steal some data to they were able to clean out your checking accounts, right? And so the scope varies depending on the success of what they were able to get access to. So we say all of this and we share all of this with you to understand that the best defense is at times a good offense. And what I mean by that is that you want to be thinking, how do I protect myself before this happens, right? We want to be proactive instead of reactive, right? The old saying of, you don't want to close the barn door after the horse gets out. You want to close the barn door before the horse gets out. And so thinking about taking steps to protect your network before these things happen is a good solid way to think about doing these things. And one of the goals and objectives of our work here as a committee is that it's not our job to tell you you must do these specific things. Our job is to inform you, to educate you, and to get you to think about these risk factors for your parish, because risk means different things to different parishes. And so what may make sense in terms of how we mitigate risk for one parish may not make sense for another parish. But regardless of the parish, everybody should be thinking about, how do I protect my network, and to what extent, where are my assets, and what steps do I need to take to protect my network? And so that's why we're focusing, specifically on this today. Right. So when we think about protecting our network, both wired and wireless, right, what are some of the things, the most common things that we tend to see, broadly speaking, across the country? One of the big things that we see are either on the wireless network front, open wireless networks with no passwords, or wireless networks that don't have any type of encryption at all, or wireless networks where the default password has not been changed for some period of time. Okay. And this is a difficult one because churches want to be able to offer this as a service to their parishioners. And this, as always, becomes a balancing act. And being able to provide network connectivity, internet connectivity to your parishioners during liturgy, during whatever activities may be happening on church grounds, is a nice thing to do. Sometimes parishes are located in areas where parishioners don't get cell coverage on church grounds. And again, I'm going to point to my church in particular. I personally get horrible cellular coverage on church grounds, and so I have to rely on our wireless network on grounds. And there are a lot of parishes that are the same way, and so they want to be able to provide that service to parishioners. Absolutely makes sense, and we get it. The question is, how do you provide that service while also making sure that you protect the church's business side of the network? And so making sure that you don't make the network, the wireless network, wide open and not require at a minimum a password, right? The next thing is that we see unsecured devices where we don't have, and this primarily happens on the operational side of the network, where we don't require minimum standards in terms of making sure that church-owned devices are patched in terms of software to a minimum level. When you allow church-owned devices to operate on the business network and do so unpatched, they become easier to attack and compromise. And so making sure that you take steps to have some type of patch management program in place for your church laptops, for your church desktops, and for your mobile devices as well. Making sure that you've got a policy and a plan in place and a program in place so that those devices are regularly patched so that they're current in terms of patches goes a long way towards making sure those devices are more securely protected, and and by extension, when they join the church network, are then less likely to be able to be used by threat actors as a point of access to get into your network. The final point here on this slide, and this in my mind is really the biggest item of them all, and that is this concept of what we refer to as network segmentation. And this notion of network segmentation is the concept where we create different virtual networks within your physical network in your environment. And what I mean by that is this: you've heard me make reference already to the business network and then the guest network. And what we're referring to there is the creation of what we call VLANs, or virtual networks. You have a physical network, which is the network cabling that's running all throughout your campus network. And then there is the ability within networking to create VLANs, or virtual networks. And when you create these virtual networks, or VLANs, that creates this, what we're referring to here is network segmentation. And it creates, from the networking perspective, separate networks logically that all reside physically on the same physical cabling, but the networking devices that are running in your environment, your routers and your switches, all manage the traffic such that it looks like there are multiple physical networks running in your environment. The benefit to that is that the devices that attach to these different VLANs, or virtual networks, all get different IP addresses and different ranges, and they don't see each other. And what that means is, if I attach my laptop or my phone to the guest network, and we have properly VLANed the business network off from the guest network, then people who are just visiting and come to church on Sunday and get on the guest network so that they can pull down, the liturgy for the week and what have you, they don't see the operational business network where the priest's laptop is, the office printer is, the office laptop is, because they have been virtually segmented off. And so those networks operate logically separately, and they don't see each other. That's a very good thing from a security perspective. And so one of the basic things that you should look to do within your church's network is engage in network segmentation. And so that's a core principle that you want to look to do, is segment your networks off so that they don't see each other, and that the inherent protection that comes from that really is a big basic step in terms of protecting your business operations, your core business network, from your guest network. And then secondarily, for example, and I'm going to use our church environment again because it's the one I'm most familiar with, we have a number of security devices, cameras and monitors and fire alarms and smoke detectors and things of that nature. We have created a separate network for them. And so in our environment, we have a guest network, we have a business network, we have what I refer to broadly as an IoT network, an Internet of Things network, which is the cameras and all the smart devices. And then we have also created another network solely for all of the smart devices that we are using in our classroom environment. And so we've got all of these multiple networks running. And as far as the devices on those networks are concerned, they just exist within those single networks, and they're not aware of the other networks that we're running. And so those devices can't see each other across multiple networks. And that's a degree of protection that is really, really helpful. When you run what we call just a single flat network where everything can see everything, from an attacker's perspective, that gives me a great big playground to engage in my shenanigans in. And once I get a foothold anywhere in your network, that I can scan and probe every device in your network, including the priest's laptop, including the office administrator's desktop. And so when I segment the traffic, if I can't get access to that network where those devices are attached, then I don't know they exist, much less being able to scan them and try to find a way into them. So big, big example. So what happens if we don't engage in these behaviors? Well, it can potentially be a bad day. And it's some of the things that we've talked about already, right? We've talked about the big boogeyman in the room, right? Data breaches. And we watch the news, we see these things happen every day. We hear about ransomware attacks and data breaches where organizations are encrypted and locked down, and the threat actors say, for $1 million, I'll unencrypt everything for you and you can go back to business as usual. Oh, and by the way, if you don't pay me the $1 million, all the data I stole, that's going to embarrass you. That's going to humiliate, your patients, your clients, what have you. That's going to make you look bad. We're going to release it to the public, right? These things are happening every day, and to a lesser extent, we're no less targets for that type of behavior. And so these types of things can and do happen to us. Disruption, again, due to malware, that's a variant of what we were just talking about, where if a threat actor is able to get into our environment and drop that malware and start encrypting the parish administrator's desktop, and we can't get access to the data, we can't do our work, that's a bad day for everybody. In our case, they're probably not going to ask for $1 million. They're probably going to ask for several $1,000s, or tens of thousands of dollars, and we may or may not have it, right? And some of you may be thinking, well, what about cyber insurance? Well, have you purchased any, right? Has your parish looked at that as part of its risk management plan? Right? These are all things that you need to think about, that go over and above just your simple network security plan. And so, and again, there are no simple, easy answers to cyber security insurance either. It can be expensive. It can be time consuming. You may not qualify. And there are numerous instances where even when clients have cyber security insurance and they go to make a claim, those claims have been denied because the insurance carriers have made claims that, well, you weren't in compliance with your policy because you didn't do A, B, C, and D in terms of protecting your environment. So it's an interesting environment and an interesting space to be in right now, the cybersecurity insurance space. But it can be an answer. But ideally, you'd like to be in a position where you don't ever have to make a cyber insurance claim because you've done everything you can to protect your network environment to stop these things before they ever happen. Right. So again, that goes back to what are we doing on a daily basis, on a periodic basis, to make sure that we're protected day in and day out, to make us less of a target than somebody else down the road, where threat actors say, this environment, and they're looking at your church, this environment's too hard to break into. I'm going to go find another target of opportunity and break into them. And, in my line of work, and this is going to sound horrible, but that's the outcome that you want. There's an old saying, I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun, the person next to me. And in a sense, that's what it's like. You want to raise the bar of entry for threat actors to get into your environment such that it becomes cost prohibitive for them from a time and effort perspective. And so when we look at doing all of these things, we're looking at raising the bar to make it difficult enough that these threat actors lose interest in your environment because they realize this is going to take more time and trouble than it's worth for me, because this is a business for them as well. Most of them aren't doing this just because they want to. This is how they earn their living. And so if they are putting more time and effort into getting into your environment than they believe they're going to be able to extract from you financially, then that equation doesn't make sense for them. It's an economics problem, right? It's a finance problem for them. And so that's really what we're looking to do here. Just raise that bar such that it becomes difficult for them and they choose to move on to another target and they leave you alone. That's what we're looking to achieve here. Right. So core, well, not cork, but core network security practices. We've talked about some of these things already, right? But I want to reiterate here: when you're offering Wi-Fi services to your parishioners, to your office network, for example, make sure that you're using a steady and reliable and non-trivial password to even be able to join the wireless network, and make sure that you are using the most recent Wi-Fi encryption standard available. These update periodically, and so you want to make sure that you are using the most recent standard available. And you want to make sure that you change that password periodically. A good reference point would be quarterly, for example. Just get into that routine so that it rotates periodically, just to, again, to make things a bit more difficult for threat actors who may just want to come in and join your network. Make it a bit more difficult for them just by changing your guest Wi-Fi password periodically. Make it a bit more difficult for them by changing your office Wi-Fi password periodically, right? Doing small things like that. Network segmentation, right? We've already talked a lot about that already. Um, Enabling firewalls at a minimum at the edge of your network where your campus network joins the public internet. Depending on the size and scope of your campus network, it may make sense to have internal firewalls also placed within your campus network. But again, that decision rests largely with the size and scope of your day-to-day operations. Again, there is no tried and true answer there. There is no one size fits all. It depends literally on the size and scope of your day-to-day operations. Enabling when and where you can what we refer to as EDR, endpoint detection and response, on your endpoints. And when we speak of endpoints, we're speaking broadly. An endpoint is basically any device that you attach to a network. So in this context, endpoints would be mobile devices, right? Like your cellular phone that attaches to the network, your laptops, tablets, desktops. Those are all, broadly speaking, endpoints. And so when you start getting into really intermediate and advanced ways to engage in network security, right, over and above just having the basics of having your network segmented and changing passwords and making sure that you're using solid encryption on your wireless network, then you start looking at those are the basics, right? Then you start looking at how can I start branching out a little bit? Then you start looking at how can I make sure that the devices themselves that hop on my network, especially the devices that we own as a parish and we manage, right? How can we make sure that those devices are protected? That's when you start looking at employing what we call EDR or XDR solutions, and that is where you're actually monitoring actively those devices themselves, and that's where you employ software to monitor those devices directly. And that's where you start getting into 24-hour, 7-day-a-week active monitoring of your network and those endpoints. And when those endpoints are attacked or compromised, the software or the agent that's running on those devices fire an alert to an administrator to say, hey, this device, this specific device, right now, right this minute, is either under attack or has just been compromised. And it gives the security administrator or the network administrator a heads up to say, hey, you need to take action right now because this specific device has just been successfully attacked or compromised. And in a situation where minutes can count and minutes can make the difference between a successful and unsuccessful attack, having that kind of heads up can give you, your network administrator, if you have one, or your security administrator, if you have one, the time and the heads up that they need to take the appropriate action to protect the rest of the network from that compromised device. PCI DSS compliance. This relates to churches that are taking credit cards for any type of transaction. For the most part, there are a lot, my general sense, and I could be wrong about this, so I'm interested to hear from all of you in the Q&A. My general sense from the conversations I've had with parishes and administrators in my interactions with them is that most folks have outsourced the management of their credit cards to third-party vendors, like Stripe or Square or Clover. And in doing so, basically what you have done, whether you're aware of it or not, is that you have basically outsourced the risk that goes with PCI DSS and the compliance pieces there to those vendors. And so when you pay those transaction fees to those vendors, in effect, you're paying them to manage that risk for you. For those parishes who actually have a traditional credit card, swipe machine in-house that interfaces directly with your credit card vendor, with your bank, you do need to be very much concerned with whether or not your network is in compliance with the current iteration of PCI DSS. If you are that type of parish where you have the traditional credit card machine that came from your bank, you do have to comply with PCI DSS. You will have to have an audit, and you do have to make sure that, for example, the network that these credit card transactions travel on is segmented completely. And it goes back to network segmentation like we talked about previously. From the rest of your network. And so that's why when we talk about using third-party vendors to handle your credit card transactions, like Stripe or Square or Clover or others like them, they take all the risk out of that. And so dealing with them, all of those requirements are set aside because dealing with them manages all of that for you. And so only you know what kind of situation you're in local to your parish, but we put this here simply to say you need to know what your situation is, and you need to make sure that if you are processing credit cards directly through your credit card gateway directly with your bank, that you have to make sure that you are taking steps to make sure that you are in compliance with PCI DSS. Otherwise, you should be good to go with your third-party vendor if you've chosen to go that route. Not really a lot to say here. Just a general tip of the hat to some of the general tools and frameworks that are out there to help you as you start to move down the road of looking at ways to secure your networks. We always point to the NIST cybersecurity framework. We've talked about that in previous conversations. NIST, federal agency, the U.S. government, they produce a lot of tremendous documentation that is free to the public, and anybody can download their documentation and read it and implement that. And we're big believers in that. And a lot of the work that we use and build out as a committee has its groundwork and its footing in the NIST documentation and the cybersecurity framework in particular. PCI DSS, we've talked about that already. If you are directly processing credit cards, you've got to make sure that you're in compliance with that. But really the big thing here is that regardless of whether you use NIST, whether you use the CIS 20 controls, whether you are processing credit cards directly and you've got to adhere PCI DSS more stringently, or you've outsourced. The big thing that we always want you to be thinking about is, how are we addressing the networks? In this context, how are we addressing network security? Are we thinking about these things, right? Our big goal is always to get parish leadership to be thinking about about cybersecurity in general, right? We're always thrilled when we hear from a parish that says, we never thought about this until we had a conversation with a member of the committee, or we saw your presentation at a clergy laity assembly, or we caught one of your presentations online. You know, that really for us is what this is all about. Our job again is to get parish leadership to start thinking about this, to shine a spotlight on cybersecurity and risk management and the associated risk that you may not be thinking about, that never crossed your mind until you started to listen to some of the things that we're talking about and some of the things that we've presented here over the last few months. And so thinking about it, taking steps to move in that direction, that's the big win here. That's the big goal. And as long as y'all are doing that, we're here to help you in any way possible, right? Understanding once again that it is not a one size fits all solution, that, you know, what you heard worked for this parish 2 counties over may not be the right solution for you, but there may be another solution that works for you that helps you achieve the same goal. Right. So what can you do, right? How can we, now that we've talked about network security and we've, you know, talked about the big boogeyman out there and all the bad things that potentially happen, right? How do you take action? What do you do? Right. Well, one of the basic things is to, if you can, if you've got some expertise within your parish, if you've got some network security professionals, some IT security professionals, start with a basic audit of your network, both wired and wireless, right? Understand where you are currently, because you cannot develop a plan to evolve things without knowing where you are. And so conduct an audit, determine current state, right? Because if you don't know where you are, then any place you go is great. So start with figuring out where you currently stand. Conduct the audit. Next, if you have the ability and resources to do so, collaborate with a services provider, an IT shop whose expertise is in this area. And I'll be honest with you, we realize that this is going to be a big ask for some of you, because this is a spend, right? This is an expenditure, and this is yet another thing that you're going to have to add to your annual budget. But we believe firmly that much like you pay for water, you pay for electricity, you pay for gas, you pay for telephone, you pay for internet, this is almost like a utility, because an unprotected network, an unmonitored network, is simply one of those situations where eventually, unfortunately, you are almost asking for trouble. And so find a managed services, an IT provider company that you can partner with, and start small, right? These types of shops can do the network vulnerability audit that I referenced earlier. Find a shop that you can partner with that you're comfortable with, who is willing to work with you, and work with them over time to do what you can the best you can, because having some level of protection is better than nothing. Review your status periodically, whether that means quarterly, whether that means semi-annually, whether that means annually, right? Once you run the vulnerability audit and you find out where you are and you develop a plan to fix the problems that you find, That's all well and good, but it's not just a one and done, because vulnerabilities are discovered every day in hardware and software. And so you have to conduct periodic audits against your environment to make sure that the fixes that you wanted to put in place from the prior audit were actually done. And then B, to find out if there are new vulnerabilities that have been discovered since then that are present in your environment. It is an iterative process where you need to just get used to, much like you have to service your car periodically, much like you have to replace the air filters in your air conditioning system, right? Networks need care and tending to as well, because they do break down, they do have vulnerabilities, and leaving them status quo is a surefire way to make sure that you create an environment where, again, eventually a threat actor is going to find their way in, unfortunately. And we talked about, this last item, just get into a routine, right? Consistent monitoring, making sure that somebody is responsible for this, making sure that at the end of the day, there is one person or a committee who is responsible for making sure that these items get done. Because just saying somebody's going to do it is a surefire way to make sure that nobody does it. And so with that, that's what we've got for today. So I will throw it open for a Q&A. What questions do you have for us today? Anything? Y'all are awful quiet. Here we go. We've got some questions. All right, so I will start at the top. So Joanna asks, what if we just use Venmo for electronic payments? So Stephen has addressed it. So let's see what Stephen has responded with here. So Stephen is right in that, Joanna, and it's we need to be careful with the response here, because we're missing some context here. When you say Venmo, tell you what, Joanna, let me find you here, and I'm gonna open up your mic. So Joanna, I did. There we go. Your mic. Yeah, your mic is hot now. When you say, what if we just use Venmo for electronic payments? Can you give me more context?
Our church uses Venmo to accept donations every Sunday. And then if we're going to have an event or a class, we direct our parishioners to pay for the class, the event, via Venmo.
Okay. And the Venmo is tied to the church's banking account?
My understanding is yes.
Okay. All right. Broadly speaking, that is okay. That is not a credit card transaction. And so were you asking it in the context of the PCI DSS reference I was making earlier?
Yes, and I thought you could use credit cards in some instances on Venmo, but I might be mistaken and mixing that up with PayPal. Same question then with PayPal then, because they do accept credit cards.
Right. So with Venmo, it is not a credit card transaction. You may or may not be able to tie a credit card to it. But again, from a risk management perspective for the church, and dealing with PCI DSS, you're okay. But I would offer a bit of caution there, right? It's generally speaking, Stephen referenced already. you are outsourcing the risk in that nothing is touching the church network. So from that perspective, when a parishioner makes a donation to the church, we have no network security concerns from that perspective, and the transaction happens from individual to the church outside the church network. So we're good from that perspective. You always have the concerns with Venmo in general that you have. But those are concerns that you always have just with Venmo in general. And so I would leave it at that and say from the PCI DSS perspective, and the church managing risk from that perspective, using Venmo like what you've described is a good solution. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move down the list here. It's Joanne again. Sorry, I just turned your mic off. I'm going to turn your mic back on again. Your Philoptochos uses Shopify, and you use the POS app for accepting payment. Is there more security we need to do? So y'all are running an online store with Shopify, and you've got items that you put up for sale. Okay, all right. Again, that's actually the optimal solution. What you've done there is your Shopify website actually sits on the Shopify network, and they are handling all the credit card transactions themselves, and you're in good shape. That is the ideal solution, really, from the parish's perspective, because the credit card transaction is being entered on the Shopify website. The credit card data is coming in via the Shopify website through their network, through their payment processing apparatus. And then ultimately, they settle up with your Philoptochos to their banking account details that they've entered when they set up their Shopify account. And then, minus the fees that they charge for handling the transaction and running the website. So at no time does any credit card data in that scenario touch the church network, and you get all the money, which is exactly the solution that you would like to see in terms of risk management from credit card transactions. And that's why you pay the fees to Shopify. So yeah, that's a good solution. Okay. And just to be clear, the POS app it's embedded in the website, correct?
Yes, we use the actual Shopify app on our phones. Like, we log in under the Philoptochos account, and we do like the touch to pay. That's what I was making sure of. But we do it all through the Shopify account.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. All right. So you've got a piece of hardware that attaches to your phone, or you said you're using the app on your phone?
Yeah, so you download the app, and then we
Yeah.
just log in with our Philoptochos account that we created that ties into our bank accounts and allows us to do tap to pay and generate orders on our mobile phone.
Yeah, conceptually the same thing.
Perfect.
That's just fine. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yep. Because when you utilize the app, right, Shopify has taken on the risk of building the app and therefore encrypting the traffic that leaves from, and I'm going to talk a little bit of nerd here, but what happens is when Shopify builds the app that they're asking you to use, they're taking on the responsibility of ensuring that the traffic that has the credit card data that they're collecting via their app is encrypted before it leaves the app and travels whatever network you may be on, whether it's the church wireless network, whether it's the cellular network for your cellular phone provider. At that point in time, it doesn't matter, because Shopify is responsible for making sure that the data is encrypted before it even leaves the app and gets transmitted from your phone. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's their responsibility, and that's what they take on when they build that app. And so that app actually has to get certified before they can actually ship it out to their clients, because they're assuming that risk. So there you go. Good questions. Stephen, with your absolute technical nerd question, MAC address table. Um, I will address this. So Stephen's question is whether or not, so are you talking about, where are you, Stephen? Let me turn your mic off. I think I know what you're asking here, but you talking about black and white listing of MAC addresses for devices on the network?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
was more of a suggestion to everyone is if you really want to add additional security on your private network, so your church business network, you can further restrict it using what's called a MAC address table of the devices that should only be attaching to that network. And that way it prevents any unauthorized device to gain access to that network. We did that at our parish to make sure that only church-owned, church-managed devices connect to the business network and nothing else.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that is a layer of protection, to be sure. The counter to that is that, and this is deep nerd technical talk. So, what a MAC address it's look at it as a unique serial number for a piece of hardware. And in this context, we're talking about a serial number for a wireless network card or a wired network card that attaches to a network. And networking devices track that. So when a device attaches to the network, they get that serial number, and they track that in what we call a MAC address table. And networking devices can be configured to only allow certain MAC addresses. It's what we call whitelisting or blacklisting, or allow listing or deny listing. And so you can enable that functionality on your networking hardware with appropriate configuration. The caveat to that is that MAC addresses can be spoofed. And so threat actors can actually give the appearance that their MAC address is an authorized MAC address. And so it's an effort to set up allow listing, deny listing, and it becomes especially burdensome in an environment where you have a large number of devices. If you've got a small network, a small number of devices, a tiny handful of devices where it's manageable, there's no harm in that. But understand that the workload that you're creating when you get into larger environments where you've got more than 3 or 4 or 5 devices, that very quickly becomes burdensome. Because if you turn that functionality on and you've got 30, 40 devices in your church environment, in your business environment, you all of a sudden have to go through and collect all these MAC addresses and punch those in. And every time somebody gets a new device, every time a device is retired, you've got to go through and manually remove that MAC address from the list and now input a new one. And so it's labor intensive, it takes time. And so understand the pros and cons of doing things like that. So, but yes, you can do that. We've got about 5 minutes left. Do we have any other questions or Q&A? Looks like we're good. Yeah, Stephen, what you got?
Hey, Andy, just wanted to respond real quick regarding the Venmo account, because we had a situation at our parish that we were forced to deal with this. And it's more of a recommendation, is if the church is going to sign up, or an organization is going to sign up with a Venmo account as an organization, not as an individual, that they should make sure that the email address that is associated with that Venmo account is owned by the church. And the reason is, and I'll give you a direct example, we had a parishioner that made a donation through Venmo to the church, but because that donation was going to a person and not the church Venmo account, it wasn't tax deductible. And their CPA caught it and would not allow them to use that as a donation deduction on their taxes.
Well, we're cybersecurity and not tax experts, so I appreciate that. But that would be a great point for the tax accountant series. But I appreciate you bringing that up. We're right at 3:00, so everybody, we appreciate you coming. A heads up, next month, for those of you who are planning to join us next month, that will be our final part of this series.
It's meant to be the larger kickoff, and then following that, they'll.
Hello? Was that? Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure what that was. But next month will be our fourth and final installment of the risk management series, and it will be entirely dedicated to your questions. We will be pushing out a form that we will ask you to submit whatever questions you've got related to cybersecurity, risk management, and we will dedicate the entire hour to just answering those questions. We'll circulate that in a separate email and through the various social media channels. Those of you who have sent me private emails asking questions, I've tried to get to them as best I can, but rest assured, if I haven't gotten to yours yet, it will be addressed in the Q&A session in December. So I will make sure those get added to the list. But that will be in December, and so we will encourage you to submit your questions on that online form for us, and we will address all of them at that December meeting. Until then, we hope that everybody has a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. If you're traveling anywhere, travel safely. If you're staying home, enjoy Thanksgiving with family and friends. We appreciate everybody being here. I will close again with, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.